Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Local Soccer Show, where we talk grassroots soccer in the local city level, at the provincial level, and the national level. Today we have a special guest from the United States. He's the founder of the Changing the Game project. We're going to be talking about some important topics, let's say, regarding coaching, parents, and children in youth sports. It's a message that has to be spread everywhere because we've seen as coaches how important it is to create an important environment for the children in order to have the passion to play their sport, whichever one it is. But obviously, we'll focus on soccer today, but it could be applied to any sport. And really, really happy to have the special guest who accepted our invitation. So I'll do the introduction soon. And before we get started, as usual, we like to thank Evangelista Sports. Thank you for your support. Go to evangelistasports.com to get all your soccer gear. Coaches are getting excited as the season is just about to start. We're finally getting some nice warm weather in Montreal, and the kids and the teams are excited to start their season. So we're going to play a little intro video, and then we'll get started with the interview. So it gives me a great pleasure and an honor to welcome John O'Sullivan to the Local Soccer Show. Hi, John. How are you?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Just in case anyone watching is not aware who John is, he has quite a resume, and I feel such a privilege to have such a well-known individual with all his experience and knowledge share his insights with us today. So John is an internationally known TEDx speaker and founder of Changing the Game project, which he started back in 2012. He's the author of 3 #1 best-selling books, Changing the Game, Every Moment Matters, and The Champion Teammate, as well as a leading youth sports blogger. He's the host of the Way of the Champions podcast, one of the top-rated podcasts in the world for coaches. He's a former collegiate and professional soccer player and has coached for over 30 years on the youth, high school, and college level. He has consulted with the U.S. Olympic Committee, U.S. Soccer, USA Football, U.S. Lacrosse, USA Swimming, Ireland Rugby, Aussie Rules Football, and many others. And lastly is the National Advisory Board for the Positive Coaching Alliance and the National Association for Physical Literacy. Wow, that's quite the resume, John. So I'll just start off with something simple. What made you want to start the Changing the Game project?
It was interesting. So I'd been coaching, at that time for 20 years or so, and my own children at that time were 4 and 5 years old, and you start to see things a little differently as a parent, right? And so you see that environment that you want your kids to be in, and felt like I was doing a lot of work on a team level or even my local club level to do that. but I just was really passionate about, can I change it and do something bigger? Can I reach more people? And so I decided to. I was also kind of at the same time a little kind of burnt out from the coaching and the politics and everything going on, um, off the field, right? That was
Yeah.
taking away from the experience of the kids on the field. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I can do something different and reach a few more people. And so I wrote my first book then called Changing the Game, which was really for parents. And, I'd coached a bunch of kids, watched them go on and play at university, play professionally, play in, UEFA Cups and, overseas and everything, make national teams and Olympic teams. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can share some of the things that I've learned that these parents did for their kids. And so anyway, I did that. And then that led to the blog and podcast and TED Talk. And here I am, 12 years later, still doing it and still getting asked all the time, can you come to our community, can you help us out? We're the problems are similar across sports and across countries.
Yeah.
In this age that we live in now, youth sports especially have been really adultified and have been made about the needs, priorities, and values of adults and not the children playing. And so we just try to get the science out there and the best practices out there to as many people as possible so that different communities can do it a little bit better.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, you started in 2012. Fast forward 12 years later, have you seen any progress in terms of the message getting across? And has anything changed, or you still feel the same like you felt 12 years ago?
I feel like I feel like 12 years ago I was, you know, wide-eyed and ambitious and optimistic that we could really make systemic change. And I thought, when COVID hit and sports shut down everywhere, that people might go, okay, this is our moment. Like, wow, we're having family dinners and this is crazy. But, sadly, certainly in the US, the first thing that came back was sports and travel sports and tournaments. And then everyone seemed to be playing catch up after that.
Yeah.
So, at this point, 12 years in, what I've realized is the system as a whole, it's really broken and it's so big, right? North
Yeah.
American youth sports is bigger than the NFL and only growing faster and faster. But I think what we can do is make huge changes for coaches, right? Coaches who listen to this or read the books or listen to the podcast and who are bought into creating a better environment for kids. We can make a difference for, parents and families, and we can make a difference, on a school level or a club level or things like that. But um, I don't think you can make systemic change at this point. There's too much momentum. But the clubs we've worked with, the schools we've worked with, the coaches we've worked with, they say when they implement these things, you know, coaching is more enjoyable, the experience is more enjoyable,
Mhm.
kids have a better time, they develop not just as soccer players or hockey players but as people, and so coaching becomes much more fulfilling and rewarding, which, that those are the best things that I get to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the messages that are important to transmit to both the parents and the coaches is, why are the kids there in the first place? And what should the purpose of youth sports be?
Hmm.
So, what would you say to that question? What should the purpose be if we want to convey a different message in terms of what we would hope they would think it should be?
Yeah, I mean, I think 100% the purpose of sport is to get a lot of reps of becoming a better human being, right? So you get to work with people, you get to face adversity and try to overcome it. You get to learn new difficult things. You get to, try and experience failure and mistakes in a very public place. You get to learn about discipline and hard work and all these things that are what we would call life skills, right? And then if you
Mhm.
happen to have the genetics and the drive and the coaching and the environment, like you might become a high level sports person as well. But I think you can get all that other stuff, and it's not an impediment to actually being great at sports too.
Right.
What I see is when people only chase after the performance or the outcome goals, we got to win, we got to be great at this, and they forsake everything else, then a kid gets hurt and can't play. Then a kid gets burned out. Then a kid gets abused or bullied physically, mentally. I mean, we have stories of this all over, right? All over the world across many sports of people chasing these performance goals and allowing children to be sexually, physically, emotionally abused. It's just ridiculous, right? And so then at the end of it, sport serves no purpose. Um, and I don't think sport's neither good nor bad. It's just neutral, right? It's only how it's wielded by the people running sport that determine whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. And I think as many parents, and I would have been the same, like, well, yeah, you just sign your kids up for sport because it's a great thing for kids to do. Not always. You better be careful about it. That's what I believe.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that we noticed where it doesn't become enjoyable when there's a winning at all costs mentality.
Hmm.
So that's something we find that we try to transmit a winning culture to kids. Like to win when they're gonna go play a game. Obviously, there is a result. Otherwise, there wouldn't be nets for them to try to score goals. So winning and losing is part of learning. I find where coaches can go wrong is when they want to win at all costs. So at the detriment of the child, either by reducing their playing time. So
Hmm.
you put the best players on the field for longer than the other ones. And the other thing is even style of play, where basically if you're just trying to score goals and not develop their skills, you'll just boot the ball and get the fastest kid to get it so he could run and score.
Hmm.
So that's something
Yeah.
that we think, again, education to teach it's important to win, but it shouldn't be at all costs at the detriment of the you have to think of coaching all the kids, not just your best players.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things that's worth unpacking there. Number one, kids inherently want it to be competitive, right? They go out to recess at schools. Kids don't stack one team so they can win every game at recess, right? They make the teams even, right? And if they're not even, they trade a player so that it becomes even, right? Because
Yeah.
competing is what matters. And so I am not the anti-competitive guy at all. I mean, obviously in my playing stint and coaching stint, like, yeah, you want to win, but that's not, you know, you can't teach winning, right? I coached for 30 years. There's no we teach winning. No, you can teach competing. So you can do all the little things that allow you to compete every day. And when you compete, you give yourself the best chance to win on the scoreboard. But the problem is if the only outcome is winning, right? Well, then what am I willing to compromise to win? Right?
Right.
So how are we going to cheat? How are we going to cut corners, use illegal players, or, far less innocuous things like, or far more innocuous things like you said, not give kids playing time, not let
Yeah.
them be on the field. Yeah, we'll put a strong kid in the back and a fast kid up front, and we'll knock balls over the top all day, and we'll win all of our U9 games. But by
Mhm.
14, those kids, most of them will wash out because they're not good enough in a sport like soccer to
Right.
continue on, right? And so coaching people to win at 9 is very different than coaching them so that they can win at 16 or 17.
Yeah.
Um, and we also know that these kids, the early developers, so many of them drop out, they quit, they get hurt, they find a different sport. So if you're only developing 6 kids or 8 kids or 9 kids, what are you going to do when 4 of those kids are gone?
Yeah.
Right. And so all these things together, I think, again, winning is an adult value, right?
Yeah.
Teaching your kids to compete, show up, full effort, full focus, train hard, give your best, right? Support your teammates, And no matter what happens, right? Be look in the mirror and be proud. Like that's what we can teach as parents. And if you do that enough, you're going to be pretty good at something.
Absolutely. So you touched on something about the children at recess and how they can be naturally competitive. There is a debate today in terms of qualifying that competitiveness. Do you believe we're genetically programmed to compete, or do we compete because we're raised that way when it comes to children?
Whew, I have no idea about the science of this. I would
Okay,
say, if you believe in evolution, all mammals compete at some point, right? We compete
right.
for scarce resources, for food, for water. So yeah, I think there's something inherent about competing. Now, competing for something that really has doesn't mean anything, like winning a game at recess. Yeah, some kids are more competitive than others for sure, right? There's a
Yeah.
scale of how driven people are. And what I see a lot of parents making a mistake is they have they have a kid who's not very driven, so they're going to drive for them, right? And he's got all the ability, or he's got the chances I never had. But if that kid doesn't have that inherent drive to improve and practice, and then what we would call intrinsic motivation,
Hmm.
they're never going to make it. They'll eventually just quit when they have the courage and they're old enough to say, mom, dad, I'm not doing this anymore. Right. And
Yeah.
so, and then some kids are super driven and great, awesome, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings me to my next point. One thing many sports organizations have done in Canada, you'll let me know if in the USA they follow this or not, is no longer keeping standings or keeping scores of matches for youth sports, let's say 12 years old and younger.
Hmm.
Wanted to know your thoughts on it because there's a debate going on whether it's actually helping the situation at all or not. Since kids remember when they win or lose, even parents will know in a season how their team performed, even though officially online there are no standings and there are no match scores. So, are they really serving a purpose not posting them, or you think it's beneficial that they don't?
I mean, who cares? Like,
Yeah,
if you're saying that some parent is keeping all the statistics and that we won anyway, well, then who cares if it's posted online? Like,
right.
what is the purpose of posting it online?
Yeah,
Right, to serve an adult ego to say, look at my kid's team. We went 14-0. Well, if you went 14-0, you're in the wrong league. Right? Like you should
right.
leave the league and go play up a year or something, or play at a higher division anyway. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it ruins anything. It's not like in
Yeah,
the moment kids are going, "Oh guys, the standings aren't being posted, so let's not try to win today." Right?
exactly. Yep.
So there's, different countries have done this differently. In Belgium, who produces pretty good players, right? They don't keep standings at 12 and under, right? Um, in Spain they do, right? But here's the thing in Spain, right? If you're coaching at a club, um, and you're playing seven aside, right? You're playing seven aside soccer through 12, and if you basically, they don't do any substitution. They play quarters, right? They don't do any
Mhm.
substitutions during quarters, but anyone on the bench at the end of the first quarter has to play the second quarter. If you're on the bench at
Yeah,
the halftime, you have to play the third, right? So every kid
yeah,
has to play half a game by the league rules. And if you don't, I mean, they come down. The coach gets suspended. The team can get suspended. So there's no gaming that system.
right.
So if you want to keep standings, great. Okay. But guess what? Then let's keep standings and everyone gets 50% playing time, mandated by the league, or you're out of the league. And now develop every player and keep standings, and not just play your best seven players or nine players or whatever. Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think culturally, right, some places can get away with it more than others.
Hmm.
But again, keeping standings of 9-year-old soccer league is only for the ego of parents. It
Yeah,
has
I would agree
nothing to do
with
with
you.
why
Yes,
kids are out there.
absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I struggle with as a coach is managing the parents. Um, it's tough because as coaches, not only do we have to manage the children, organize the practices, get them ready for games, but I also say sometimes managing the parents is even more difficult than managing the children who just want to come to the field and play and have fun.
Mhm.
So sometimes we see some parents, they blur the line between being eager and cheering on their child versus actually coaching them, to the other extreme where we do have cases, unfortunately, where you have some parents that either would yell at their kid if they make a mistake, or they yell at the coach because of something he may have done or not done, or even yell at the referee, which is kind of sad because at the youth level, most of the referees are like 14 to 17 years old and they're just
Mhm.
learning how to become a ref. So,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to coaches who have to deal with some unfortunate situations like this and passing on the message of how to make a supportive environment for make it fun to go and watch your kid play and not be overbearing?
Yeah, well, let's start with the referee part, and that's exactly you said it right? These are your if your kid is playing in a developmental league, then you have a developmental referee.
Yes.
So just like your kid, if he makes a mistake, you wouldn't chase him to the parking lot berating him. Why would you do that to a referee who makes a mistake, right? And you need
Yeah.
them to put on the games. And so, I think, that like there's some countries, I think Australia, they give first year referees a different jersey, right? So it says, it doesn't say, but it's like it's blue or whatever. And it's like, I am a first year official. I am
Right.
learning this.
Yeah.
So now you're out there. I mean, that's like yelling at your kid who's trying to learn to read, right? It's hard. So
Yeah.
I think zero tolerance for that from a coach for your parents. You're going to do that, get out. You're
Right.
not allowed to come anymore. Um, I think the next piece is, it's educating parents. Like when you're on the sideline coaching your kid on every play, coaching the kid on the ball, doing this, like you're stealing reps from your kid, right? Soccer is a game, as we all know, right? It's a
Yeah.
perception action. I have to see what's around me. I have to come up with possible solutions. I have to choose one. Then I have to technically execute it. Then I have to assess my choice and do it again and do it again and do it again. So if you're yelling at the kid in the ball of where to pass it or shoot it or this or that, you're stealing those reps. You're stealing those decision making opportunities. It might help today in the moment, unlikely, but it might, but it's not going to help over the long term. Plus, you're not at practice, right? So you don't even know what the coach is teaching them to do in this moment, right? So we see this in grassroots where,
Hmm.
you're
Yeah.
trying to, hey, we're going to pass the ball back to our goalkeeper to keep possession and we're going to spread out and we're going to try to play out of the back. Wonderful. And what are the parents yelling? Get rid of it, boot it. Don't pass it back to the goalkeeper. Well, right? If you coach young kids, you're
Hmm.
eventually going to pass one in your own net, right? Or a couple, because that's what happens and that's how you learn. And so if the parents are yelling and screaming not to do it, now it's just confusing for the kids. So I think, again, as a coach,
Yeah.
hopefully as a club, we educate parents. We have a zero tolerance policy for coaching on this, like cheer for your kids, but don't coach them, don't micromanage them, don't joystick them. And if it's happening, I want to know, and I'm going to go talk to that parent and be like, this is not okay. And if it happens again, our club policy is you sit out, you don't get to come for a month. And if it happens again, here's your card, please leave. And now your kid's out of the club because you're an idiot,
Yeah.
and I think most parents get it and will
Yeah.
follow those guidelines. But the thing is, if you have these guidelines and then you don't enforce them, that's not
Right.
really a guideline, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, luckily in my experience, I would say the majority of the parents are okay. It would
Hmm.
always be that one or two parents who either they played the sport themselves, or they're very passionate about the sports, or they have this like belief that their child is gonna play in the World Cup one day, and they have to be like so good at so young of an age that they kind of put pressure on the child, which is kind of sad. Because, like you said earlier, in terms of hearing all the different messages, even for the child, it's confusing because you could have the coach having one direction, and then you could have the parents saying something, and there's so many voices coming in at the same time. You need the child to help develop their own problem solving skills
Hmm.
and find a solution on their own instead of trying to confuse them all the
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
100%.
So now, John, another thing that comes up in conversation and talking to other coaches is maybe I would say a change in how society is today compared to the past. Um, I find one thing I did notice, if I look at how my child is today playing sports and going to school compared to when I did it at his age, I would say I was brought up in an environment where my parents were old school, they're Italian, and we had this very tough upbringing where you had to respect your parents, you had to respect authority, whether it would be the policeman, the teacher, your coach. And if you would get in trouble, the punishment would be very severe. So I would say I grew up having a bit of fear and respect for authority. So whatever the coach told me to do, I just did it. I didn't question the coach. I didn't disobey the coach. Same thing in the classroom. I would be a good student and I would be afraid to like talk out of line and things like that. I find when I look at my son, maybe the pendulums went too much the other way, where I see kids, they feel a little entitled, I would say at times. They'll tell me where they want to play on the field, what they want to do at practice. And I have friends that are teachers who say the kids of today, they don't fear or respect the teachers the way maybe kids many years ago did, and it could be something which is making life a bit difficult for coaches and teachers. So anyway, do you feel like you've seen this difference too in society as a whole in terms of how kids are brought up today, let's say compared to like 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's we shouldn't compare today's kids to how we grew up because
Yeah,
since 2010, right? Anyway, they've born with a phone in their hand and social media and
yeah,
all these sort of things that are really not helpful. I heard this psychologist Jonathan Haidt say the other day. He had a great line. He said, "We've overprotected our kids in the real world, and we've underprotected them in the online world."
yeah,
Right? And I think that's so true. So we've protected them from adversity and they don't just go out and wander the neighborhood and figure it out, right? We send them everywhere with a phone. We solve every problem for them. We bring them their homework when they forget it. Um, and then in the online world, which is really far more dangerous, we let them set up social media accounts and connect with people online who are, some pedophile posing as you know, a kid their age,
yeah,
and we just let them have these tools I mean, even adults get addicted to, right? That adults can't handle, and we're giving them to our 10-year-old or our 11-year-old and 12-year-old. So I think, I think that. So I have empathy for kids growing up this day because we've really given them the short straw in terms of our lack of parenting in the world we've asked them to grow up in. Now, I think this sort of idea of kids who are disciplined and hardworking or whatever, that happens house to house, right? That
right,
happens. Parents make that decision, but it's hard when other people around them aren't making that decision. And so I think I think teachers are correct. I think coaches are correct. But I think that's where, if they're not getting things like discipline and hard work and expectations at home, what a great opportunity for sport to do that. And
Right.
as that coach, talking to those parents and being like, listen, this is hard. You chose a hard sport. I'm going to challenge your kid. If he's coming home every day feeling comfortable, I'm not doing my job. Like, my job is to make him uncomfortable. My job is to make her, man, that was hard today. Or we ran hard, or man, we learned something new and we weren't getting it. And coach kept pushing and pushing. Like, these aren't bad things. These are good things for your kid. I think the scariest thing is, meeting some 18-year-old or 20-year-old who's never experienced adversity. Like, that's the biggest problem in the world, right?
Yeah.
Go into your first job, you finish university and you go into your first job and you've never experienced adversity. Good luck. Good
Yeah.
luck. So yeah, I mean, I think it's there, but I think as a coach, you can still have very high standards, right? And like you were talking about, I mean, when I
Yeah.
coach little kids and they're like, I want to play, I want to go in. Like, I have a rule. Like, if you ask to go in, I'm not putting you in.
Yeah.
If you ask to play a position, I'm not putting you in. Let me coach, right?
Right.
I got it. Let me coach, right? And so they pick up on that pretty quickly.
No, for sure. I do agree. As a coach, you do have to set standards and expectations. And I do find when you're well organized, eventually the kids do appreciate the environment and they'll tend to want to perform well because it's structured in a positive way for the kids. So
Yeah.
they enjoy playing the sport. So, John, another thing I wanted to talk to you about is when it comes to moving away, let's say from the youth level, U12, and now you're moving up to an older age. Um, at what age would you feel it would be the appropriate time for a child to specialize in one sport? Because we do know there are benefits to children playing more than one sport, but inevitably later on in life, either through circumstances or personal preference of a child, they'll want to stick to one sport. So, what age would you say would be best to do that?
I mean, it's hard to say because, again, for every kid, and it depends on their sport too.
Hmm.
You need a lot more reps at ice hockey and soccer at a young age than you do at volleyball or
Okay.
American football, right? Or any sort of CGS sport, running or swimming, things like that, right? So depends on the sport. I mean, middle school is pretty good, right? That's when kids are old enough to say, you know what, I really want to do more soccer. But
Yeah.
I mean, here, the reality of it is that sports are expensive. They're time consuming. You have more than one kid. You might have to say, you know what? Like, each kid only picks one club sport because that's all we can afford or that's all we can
Yeah.
balance, right? Um, but I think what's really important for parents to understand is that even if your child chooses to focus on one sport, they still need a multi-movement childhood, right? They have to
Hmm.
learn, they have to become athletes. So you can't just play baseball. You can't just, right? Like, when I meet a 15-year-old kid who's played tons of soccer and I'm like, balance on your kicking foot, and they can't, that's a problem, right? And so when those kids hit puberty and hit their growth spurt, that's when it breaks down. Then they get a lot of injuries because of the lack of athletic development. So if you are a youth player at
Hmm.
Milan or at Manchester United, you're getting all that through the club, right? You're doing
Yeah.
martial arts, you're doing parkour, you're doing strength and conditioning, and they're working on your overall athleticism, which prevents injuries, which then allows you to put in the training volume to actually make the breakthrough to the next level, right?
Yeah.
In North America, we just do soccer, right? Or we just do hockey, and then the kids break down, right? And so I would say to any parent, if your kid is interested in multiple sports, let them try to participate as long as possible in multiple sports. If they really only have one, um, then how are you getting them a multi-movement experience? Are you signing them up for martial arts? Are they doing gymnastics? Are they doing parkour? Are they doing yoga? Are they doing strength and conditioning? Because if they're not, they're eventually gonna break down and get hurt. So,
Yeah.
but I again, I think it should be really child driven at a certain age. But, I
Okay.
mean, like you said, you have young kids, right? Like, if your 7-year-old says, "I only wanna eat pizza," no offense to Italians, but you might say,
Yeah.
"That's not really great for you," right?
For sure. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
need vegetables. You need a well-rounded diet. We need some protein in there, right? So as the adult, you say, "I know what you want, but I know better at this age," right? Like, I hate when we said,
Yeah.
"Well, my 6-year-old, that's all they wanna do." Well, if they wanna drive the car, you wouldn't be like, "Here's the keys." You'd say, "No, I am the adult." So I think, it's a balance, and it's different for every kid and every family, and it also different depending on where you live, where there might not be opportunities, you know?
Yeah. Makes sense. So, John, just a couple of rapid fire questions before we finish the interview. Where did you play youth soccer growing up?
I grew up in New York.
Okay.
So I grew up on Long Island and played in the Long Island leagues and teams there, and in New York City. And then I played NCAA Division One at Fordham University in New York City.
Oh, nice.
And then I fled the jurisdiction after that.
All right. And what was your favorite team? Or even now, do you have a favorite team?
Well, when I was growing
Yeah.
up, that was the heyday of the Cosmos, so it was pretty cool.
Okay.
Like, I have a soccer ball signed by Carlos Alberto and
Oh,
and stuff,
nice.
and I was actually the same age as Pele's son, Edson, so would, like, see him once in a while and, stuff like that, and, I mean, you had Beckenbauer and Neeskens and Quinaglia and all these amazing players at the Cosmos, which
Yeah.
was pretty cool. Um, as in terms of teams that I follow, it's been hard these days, but I am a Manchester United fan, and
Okay.
so it's been a bit of a struggle here, but I've been a fan of them for quite a while.
And about favorite player, like while you were growing up playing, was there a player or two that really, you had a poster of in your room that you really liked a lot?
I mean, I would say, of a poster, it would have been like one of the Cosmos guys,
Okay, so yeah.
Um, my dad served in the army in Germany after World War II, and he was stationed in Kaiserslautern, and so he was a big fan of the German players. So I would,
Okay.
hear a
Yeah.
lot about them, and there was like Soccer Made in Germany was the only soccer that was ever on TV, so you'd like
Yeah.
watch a little bit of that for sure. But it was, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I would say, the Beckenbauer, the Pelés were the only ones you kind of really heard about, but it's not like today where you have a video game with all your favorite players on it or
Right.
whatever. I mean, I
Yeah.
think in the modern day, my favorite, I mean, I remember I watched Zidane play, got to see Zidane play for Real, which was like watching a man amongst boys. Um, and I got to go, I was at Camp Nou for Barcelona when they had Messi, Neymar, Suarez as their front three. And that was pretty spectacular to watch all three of those guys playing together. Just that was unbelievable for sure.
Yeah, great stuff. So, John, one last thing before I let you go. For anyone watching or listening, if they want to learn more about your project, follow you on social media, and get to know, learn a lot of your wonderful insights, where you suggest they go and share your social media handles, please.
Yeah, sure. So changingthegameproject.com is the website. And that's the easiest place to find the blog. The podcast is called Way of Champions. There's links to all the podcasts there, but that's on everything from Spotify to Apple to any
Hmm.
place you would listen to podcasts. The books are all on Amazon. If you're interested in those, the coaching book is called Every Moment Matters. The book for being a great teammate is called A Champion Teammate, and then Changing the Game is the one we wrote for parents. Um, and then social media, which I despise, at CTG Project HQ is like Twitter and Instagram, where I don't post very often.
Okay.
Um, if you want to connect on social media, LinkedIn, just look up for Coach John O'Sullivan on LinkedIn, because I feel like LinkedIn has reasonable people. And so that's a good place where I
Yeah.
do post blogs and podcasts and things like that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'm not big on social media myself. So, yeah, it's definitely LinkedIn, a more professional, let's say, resource of information, let's say. So,
Exactly. I agree.
yeah.
I agree.
Very good. John, thank you so much for your wonderful insights and your time. Really appreciate it. I'm just going to do a little outro video and then I'll say bye to you offline. Thanks again,
Awesome.
everyone. Remember, evangelistasports.com. Get all your stuff for your soccer season. And we'll share the links to John's website and his social media and also his podcast so you can follow and learn from this wonderful gentleman. Again, thank you again, John.
Thank you.